Hi, it's Katrina. The Bad Omen. A rare and mysterious sea creature was captured in South America in the summer of 2022. This creature was absolutely enormous and drew huge crowds at the docks in the Chilean city of Arica. The fish wasn't mysterious in that nobody knew what it was, but rather in that the locals have taken it as an extremely bad omen. It was an oarfish, and they are very rare. Fishermen discovered the massive oarfish just swimming around in shallow water off the coast as if totally normal. But this isn't normal, as oarfish live deep in the ocean, between 660 and 3,300 feet deep, and are very rarely seen by humans, never mind captured by them. Most experts agree almost every myth of sea serpents across the globe can be traced back to ancient sightings of oarfish. To make things even more terrifying, the oarfish is typically sighted before some kind of massive disaster, usually a tsunami. This particular oarfish was estimated at between 16 and 20 feet, which isn't even half as big as they can grow. Unconfirmed reports have documented the oarfish at 50 feet, with confirmed catches at 26 feet. They are totally bizarre because unlike pretty much every other fish in the ocean, the oarfish can allegedly swim vertically with its head pointing up and its tail pointing at the ocean floor. Scientists have no idea why it swims like that. Hopefully, it's not the harbinger of doom the Chileans think it is. They caught it in mid-July 2022, and so far there haven't been any crazy disasters. But maybe it's still early days. The Tentacle Rabbit. Something very unusual was just discovered in South Dakota in the summer of 2022. In Sioux Falls, a rabbit was found with tentacles drooping off its face. The rabbit looked as though an octopus or a squid had attached itself to its face as some sort of disturbing symbiotic relationship. But unfortunately for the rabbit, it was even more disturbing than that. The afflicted creature was discovered by a local resident named Dennis Shore while he was walking his dog one morning. Dennis had never seen anything like it in his life. The tentacles growing from the rabbit's face and head weren't actually appendages, but a growth caused by a form of the papillomavirus. This is a specific virus only found in cottontail rabbits. According to Josh Delger, a biologist with Game Fish and Parks, the infection spreads through ticks or mosquitoes, and it's similar to HPV in humans. Whereas HPV will give people warts, the rabbit version, CPRV, creates massive drooping growths that look like deflated rubber octopus arms. But don't worry, because the rabbit won't die from having a face full of tentacles. The natural lifespan of a cottontail rabbit is only about 3 years, and so it will most likely die of natural causes, if it doesn't get eaten by an eagle first. Egyptian Mystery Sea Creature. In June of 2022, Andrea Judd stumbled upon something quite astonishing while on a beach in Egypt. She was at the Gabr el Bint on the Sinai Peninsula, and there on the rocky sand was something that looked like it came straight from a horror movie. It kind of looked like an eel, or maybe an alien. It had a pair of jaws, didn't seem to have any eyeballs, no ears, no fins or flippers, and it was a dry gray color. It almost looked like the mummy of some mutated mermaid, which would have been suitable seeing as it was found in Egypt. The creature was definitely dry. It had gotten pushed about 40 feet from the water and then spent a significant amount of time in the sun. Andrea found the specimen early in the morning, but she didn't touch it because it made her feel uneasy. According to what she told the Daily Mail, she thought it looked like an orc from Lord of the Rings. Andrea did take pictures, and she posted those pictures on social media and asked for an identification. She included the fact that the creature was about the size of her entire arm. Some said it was a baby Loch Ness monster. Some said a moray eel, but it was National Aquarium employee Holly Bourbon who identified it as a viper moray. It's pretty similar to the moray eel, but even more frightening. They live in the Red Sea and aren't considered dangerous to people, just ugly and scary with their long, slippery, snake-like bodies and mouths full of fangs. The Bear Lake Monster. The Bear Lake Monster supposedly lives near the border of Utah and Idaho. This mysterious creature has its roots going all the way back to the days before the Pilgrims, when Native Americans were the only people in North America. According to the legends of the people who lived on the land near Bear Lake, the monster gobbles up anyone who gets too close to the edge. Some say it was a very real creature that lived in the lake, while others say it was just a fairy tale told to keep kids from wandering too close to the water and accidentally drowning. We know the Native American legends of the monster date back centuries, but the earliest modern report of an actual mysterious creature living in Bear Lake was in 1868. A man by the name of Joseph C. Rich sent a story about witnessing a massive serpent-like beast in the lake to the Desert News newspaper. The creature was supposedly responsible for plucking swimmers out of the water, never to be seen again. We don't know if this ever actually happened, but supposedly the locals became so worried that everyone stopped visiting the lake. Only the bravest of souls would actually go in, and even today people are wary of Bear Lake's waters. The Luska. The Luska is a mysterious creature that is half shark and half octopus. Some believe it's actually just a gigantic octopus, bigger than any other octopus species on the planet, and people have only mistaken it for having shark parts. In the last few centuries, the mysterious sea creature has been spotted more than once in the Caribbean. One of the biggest issues, though, is that no one can seem to agree on what exactly they saw. For example, there was a sighting of the Luska on the coast of the Bahamas on January 18, 2011. A gigantic octopus, the likes of which nobody had ever seen before, washed up on Grand Bahama Island. Eyewitnesses said the creature was at least 30 feet long, but that parts of its head and mouth were missing. It had tentacles like an octopus, but it almost seemed like there had been something different where its head should have been. There was another famous sighting in 1896. This exact same thing washed up near St. Augustine in Florida. Locals said it was the carcass of the biggest octopus ever, comparable to a kraken. But eventually the ocean pulled it back in, and all trace of it was lost. These tales and similar ones have been told for hundreds of years. Either there really is a species of gigantic octopus unknown to scientists, or there is an octopus-shark hybrid lurking near the Caribbean. Or perhaps it's all just a fantasy. What do you think? Do you think the Luska's real? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. South African alien. In South Africa back in 2013, a park ranger named Llewellyn Dixon snapped some photos of something that appeared to be a dead alien. The carcass was extremely strange looking, with an unusually slender body, skinny arms and legs, and a head almost like a petrified goat. It was so weird that no one had any idea what it was, and so Llewellyn took the corpse to a local veterinarian to perform an autopsy. As it turns out, the creature wasn't actually from a different world. According to Dr. Magdalena Brom at the Crags Veterinary Clinic, it was just a baby baboon. The reason it looked so much like a freakish extraterrestrial was that the baby had been carried around by its mother long after it had already died. And here's where things get even more bizarre. Dr. Brom said such behavior isn't unusual. A mother will sometimes carry around her deceased infant for up to 4 weeks before finally letting it go. During that time, the infant primate will get stretched out and dry until it looks like leather, like something you might see used in a voodoo ritual. Monster snails in London. A couple of very unusual creatures have been spotted near London Bridge in the English capital. 2 giant African land snails were found making their way down a busy street after escaping from a cardboard box. Somebody had left the snails in a makeshift cage with some lettuce and then abandoned them. These snails are not only gigantic, over 8 inches long, but also potentially fatal. Giant African land snails are known for carrying deadly parasites that transmit rat lungworm to humans. And if that sounds horrifying, that's because it is. The rat lungworm parasite can cause meningitis and kill. Even more, the giant African land snail is considered one of the most dangerous pests in the world. These things breed like crazy, multiply quickly, and can eat all the crops in a single farmer's field nearly as quickly as a cloud of locusts. Their favorite food includes cocoa, bananas, peanuts, and cauliflower. They are a major problem in Florida, and now they've been let loose in London. But don't worry, nobody has caught any parasites from these snails yet. They were picked up by a Good Samaritan, a local wildlife volunteer named Beth Crivelli. Beth has since taken them home to care for them until she can find someone to adopt them. A living balloon. Lurking deep inside the darkest depths of the Indian Ocean, explorers captured video of a very strange and unusual creature. The dive involved an unmanned vessel going deep into the Java Trench, one of the deepest parts in the Indian Ocean. The crew was watching back the video when they saw the creature emerge from the darkness. According to Alan Jamieson from Newcastle University, it drifted toward the camera, then drifted off again, and looked like a plastic bag floating in the wind, or rather like a balloon on a string. The creature had a single long appendage like a tentacle, and it appeared to be holding on to something. The body of the creature was a gelatinous clear blob, like a misshaped balloon. Nobody had ever seen one of these animals before, and so nobody knew what to call it. Alan had to do some seriously in-depth research, and he turned up a similar sighting from Japan about 20 years prior. The Japanese described it as a species of stalked ascidian, commonly known as a sea squirt. However, there were some major differences. The creature seen by the Japanese had filaments on its head, but the one in the Indian Ocean did not. Because of these differences, researchers believe they have found a totally new kind of animal. It lives 21,000 feet beneath the ocean and has itself anchored to the sea floor with its singular tentacle. We don't know what it eats, but it probably filter feeds through unseen mouths. Seeing as the Java Trench has hardly been explored and is crazy deep, it's no surprise that there are unknown critters living inside it. Taiwanese water monster. Sun Moon Lake in Taiwan is one of the most spectacular natural places in the entire island. It's located high up in the mountains, a mysterious lake steeped in history and culture. It's a popular tourist destination and is apparently home to a water monster. Back in 2016, local paddleboard coach Lai Young Lee was guiding a group of tourists across the lake on their paddleboards when he spotted an unusual shape swimming up toward the surface. He paddled close to it, trying to see what it was, but it immediately disappeared back into the unfathomable depths. He tried to take a video, but only managed to get the last few seconds. Even only seeing it from afar and for a brief moment, it was clear whatever he had witnessed was nearly the size of his entire paddleboard. It was probably 6 feet long, and it didn't look like anything he had seen before, which was surprising since he had worked at the lake for a very long time. So far, we don't know for sure what the gigantic fish was. It looked like a miniature sea serpent, and may have been a long-fin eel. Eels were added to the lake to reduce the overwhelming population of giant snakehead fish, and they do look kind of like sea serpents. Or maybe there's actually a Loch Ness Monster-type situation going on here, and we just don't know it yet. The Furry Sea Creature. In Australia in January 2022, a beachgoer came across something peculiar, half buried in the sand in Darook Park. She had no idea what it was. It was very obviously fuzzy, and it wasn't moving very quickly. The woman took a video and posted it online to see if the bizarre creature could be identified. Some said maybe it was a mole crab or some kind of crustacean. It honestly looked like a toupee that had fallen off somebody's head and gotten a mind of its own. It was eventually identified by the Australian Marine Conservation Society as a sea potato, also known as a heart urchin. Sea potatoes bury in the sand and live in the mud, and their bodies are covered in tiny spines. That's what makes them look so fuzzy. And they feed primarily on dead things, using their specialized tube feet to basically suck the nutrients out of dead animals and plants. The sea beast. A newly discovered fossil has revealed a terrifying aquatic predator that scientists have compared to the T-Rex. They are calling this beast the underwater Rex, a fierce and relentless hunter that lived during the late Cretaceous period. It's not a totally new kind of creature, but could be a new species of the already identified mosasaur. The prehistoric monster has been named Thalassotitan atrox, and it lived between 145 and 66 million years ago. The creature likely had a head that looked reptilian and hunted challenging prey such as sea turtles, plesiosaurs, and other mosasaurs. It also had a tail fin kind of like a shark and was at the very top of the food chain. It didn't matter where in the ocean it was. There was nothing else nearly as scary. Paleontologist Nick Longrich from the University of Bath described it best when he said the prehistoric mosasaur was like a Komodo dragon mixed with a great white shark, but with a T-Rex and a killer whale mixed in for good measure. It was a total abomination, one that could reach 40 feet in length. It was bigger than any other reptile, with its closest living relatives being snakes and iguanas. You might think crocodiles or alligators, but nope. Iguanas. What truly separates the thalassotitan from other species of mosasaur is that it appears to have been far more aggressive. Its fossilized teeth were found broken and worn, suggesting they had been used to rip through the bones of other large predatory fish. Nobody knows for sure what animals it was eating, but scientists believe it was crunching the bones of its own kind. The Truden. The Truden lived 76 million years ago during the peak of dinosaur evolution. It was a small dinosaur considering the competition at the time, standing only 11 feet tall and weighing around 110 pounds. Like other dinosaurs, it laid eggs and had similar traits to birds and crocodiles. However, scientists are unsure if this slender and bizarre dinosaur was an ancestor of either or both. What made the Truden a truly exceptional and terrifying predator was its brain. Its brain was huge, even larger than the brains of modern reptiles in relation to its size. Scientists speculate that with its massive brain, the Truden was far more intelligent than the average dinosaur, and perhaps even more intelligent than modern birds. That's what's earned the Truden the title of world's smartest dinosaur. Not only was the Truden a genius, but it was also a skilled killer. It had larger than average eyes so that it could hunt at night or in the dark. It was also considered an omnivorous predator. It had grasping hands that it could use to shovel vegetables and nuts into its mouth, while also possessing sharp teeth for ripping apart animals smaller than itself. But here's the best part about the clever Truden. In 1982, Canadian paleontologist Dale Russell speculated that if the Truden had survived the extinction of the dinosaurs, it would have evolved to have human-level intelligence. He believed that it would have continued to grow just like how monkeys grew into humans. Eventually, the Truden would have become a brainy, perceptive, walking and talking reptile with partially opposable thumbs and 3 fingers on its hand. If that's not terrifying, I don't know what is. Purasurus. In the world of prehistory, there were 2 giant crocodilians that make all living crocodilians look like baby lizards. There was the Sarcosuchus and the Purasurus. No one is really sure which one was bigger, though many scientists lean toward the Purasurus as being the largest crocodilian that ever walked the face of the earth. This terrifying reptile lived 8 million years ago in South America. It had a huge head, sharp teeth, and an unprecedented bite force. Its bite was so strong that its teeth would have sunk through muscle and bone like a hydraulic press. A single bite would have shattered the internal structures of whatever it attacked, rupturing organs and causing the animal to die in seconds. Just like modern crocodiles, the Purasurus was an ambush predator. This thing would have been found lurking around lakes and swamps, waiting for thirsty, unwitting animals to show up for a drink. Then it would have burst out of the water and captured its victim in its powerful jaws. Nobody knows exactly how large the prehistoric crocodilian grew, but based on fossils of its skull, it grew anywhere between 34 and 41 feet long. It also weighed an average of about 6.2 tons. Unfortunately, the only remains that have ever been found are skulls. Paleontologists have never discovered fragments of its body, making its exact size unknown. Giganotosaurus. The Giganotosaurus was even bigger than the Tyrannosaurus rex. Scientists believe the heaviest Giganotosaurus was about 10 tons, whereas a female T-Rex could weigh just a little over 9 tons. It's not really a huge difference, but it's enough to make the Giganotosaurus one of the biggest predators in the history of the planet. It wasn't the largest carnivore of all time, as that was the Spinosaurus. Still, it was so massive that its preferred prey was the Argentinosaurus, a creature that outweighed the Giganotosaurus by over 40 tons. An adult Argentinosaurus was a true behemoth of the dinosaur, a kind of sauropod that could grow to an estimated 115 feet in length. But here's where things get truly terrifying. Researchers believe there is no way a Giganotosaurus could have knocked over and killed an Argentinosaurus by itself. Instead, they believe the largest carnivore to ever live in South America hunted in groups. They may have had behavior similar to modern wolves, working together to take down prey significantly larger than themselves. And while you might think the Giganotosaurus was a slow-moving monster, that wasn't the case at all. It's believed it could run faster than the smaller T-Rex, potentially reaching speeds of up to 20 miles per hour. The Microraptor. In Greek, the name Microraptor translates to small thief. This dinosaur is one of the smallest ever discovered, and, according to National Geographic, the smallest official species of raptor. It only weighed about 2 pounds and stood 1 foot tall, about the size of a crow. It had extremely sharp claws, which it used for climbing to the tops of trees and searching out its prey. The Microraptor could then launch itself from the treetop and glide like a flying squirrel, catching insects in its mouth and landing on lower branches. This thing was unlike any raptor that we know of, and unlike any other dinosaur as well. It had feathers, it could basically fly, and its arm bones were almost identical to the bones in modern birds. In the realm of all things terrifying, the raptor was a little terror. It wasn't as big and dangerous as a 30-foot turkey, but if it was alive today, it would definitely be a horrifying nuisance. Just imagine a bunch of crow-sized dinosaurs with razor-sharp teeth loitering on the power lines outside your house. The Microraptor was kind of like an oversized hummingbird with a hunger for meat. Scientists have also confirmed its feathers were iridescent, meaning it had a metallic shine as it glided through the air. The Microraptor wasn't the only prehistoric creature that could glide either. There was another feathered glider called the Archaeopteryx that existed 25 million years before the Microraptor. The only difference is that the Archaeopteryx wasn't a raptor. It was a non-avian link between dinosaurs and modern birds. The Gigantoraptor. The Gigantoraptor, despite the name, was not technically a raptor. It was a dinosaur that lived about 95 million years ago and weighed about 2 tons. Its closest relative was the much smaller Oviraptor. When compared to a human, a fully grown individual wouldn't have stood any taller than its knees. It was truly huge, and yet all we know about it comes from a single fossil specimen found in Mongolia in 2005. The fossil was found by accident by a Chinese paleontologist while filming a documentary about a totally unrelated dinosaur. The Gigantoraptor is believed to have been a kind of oviraptorosaur, a group of dinos that walked on 2 legs and looked kind of like turkeys. Oviraptorosaurs are most famous these days for their rude habit of stealing and eating the eggs of other dinosaurs. They were egg thieves, although the Gigantoraptor was most likely too big to be partaking in that behavior. Instead, it was really just a giant turkey. It would have looked almost identical to everybody's favorite Thanksgiving bird, except that it stood 26 feet tall. The prehistoric creature was so big, it could have easily consumed a whole family of humans for a midday snack. Pterodactyls. Pterodactyls were some of the most terrifying creatures that dominated the skies during the age of the dinosaurs. They weren't technically dinosaurs, but were flying reptiles. They had bat-like wings, only extremely large, but there were a lot of different kinds of pterodactyls, and each one was unique. The biggest pterodactyl of them all was also the largest flying animal that ever lived. It's called the Quetzalcoatlus northropi, and it lived 67 million years ago. Its wingspan is estimated to have been anywhere between 35 and 52 feet. Either one would have made it positively gigantic, nearly the size of an airplane. With great big wings came a great big body. The Quetzalcoatlus was most likely around 32 feet from the tip of its beak to the end of its tail, and weighed anywhere from 150 to 550 pounds. But the most notable feature of this giant reptile was its skull. It had an extremely long beak, kind of like a stork, which it could have used for picking dinosaurs off the ground, like you might pick up an ant with a pair of tweezers. And while it could have done that, it probably didn't. Like most flying animals, the Quetzalcoatlus likely sustained itself on a diet of fish. Homotherium latidens. The Homotherium latidens is an extinct genus of saber-toothed cat that lived throughout North America, Africa, and Eurasia up until very recently, only about 28,000 years ago. These big cats were some of the most brutal predators of both the Pliocene and the Pleistocene, growing just about 4 feet at the shoulder and weighing as much as an African lion. The biggest difference between the Homotherium and other saber-toothed cats like the Smilodon was that it had surprisingly short upper canines. Unlike those two big teeth that make saber-toothed cats so famous, the ones the Homotherium had were short, flat, and serrated. Still, they were powerful instruments for hunting. It used its incisors and canines as a puncturing device, killing just about anything it sunk its fangs into instantly. Even though it had shorter teeth, its head was larger than other saber-toothed cats, and it had a more muscular jaw. This meant each bite had a higher chance of being fatal. Sadly, just like all the other saber-toothed cats, the Homotherium went extinct as the Ice Age came to an end. But the animal still had a pretty long run before extinction. It likely evolved into its final form about 5 million years ago, then became such a skilled predator that it migrated to all the corners of the world. Its bones have been found everywhere from Africa to South America. Chalicotherium. The Chalicotherium lived 15 million years ago, long after the dinosaurs were already extinct. It's one of the only animals known to science that's unclassifiable because it doesn't have a single direct living descendant. Although it was a gigantic mammal, that's the only thing scientists can classify it as. Some have suggested it could be an extremely distant relative of the horse, but that's only speculation. The truth is that the Chalicotherium did not look or behave like any mammal still alive today. It had a bunch of bizarre features that made it look like a freaky animal created in somebody's dream. Its front legs were longer than its hind legs, and it walked kind of like a gorilla, dragging its knuckles across the ground. It had claws rather than hooves, which it likely used to scrape vegetation from trees. It may have resembled a giant sloth, although it was, at the same time, nothing like a giant sloth. So how dangerous was this creature? Scientists know based on fossil evidence that it stood roughly 9 feet tall and weighed 1 ton. It would have been a difficult creature to kill, with adults having practically no natural predators. It was like a bigger and much more muscular gorilla, only more similar to a horse or something with hooves. It didn't eat meat, preferring a diet of leaves and fruits. But still, it definitely was able to defend itself with its scythe-like claws. Small eyes, big bite. The T-Rex had very small arms. Most people think of the Tyrannosaurus rex as the king of the dinosaurs, with stubby little hands that weren't much use at all. But new research shows that not only did the most famous dinosaur in history have tiny arms, but it also had unusually small eyes. Researchers from the University of Birmingham believe its tiny eyeballs helped it to bite even harder. It all has to do with the eye sockets. The team investigated the oval eye sockets of the T-Rex and found them to be unexpectedly narrow. It appears that by evolving narrower eye sockets, thereby reducing the space needed to house the eyeballs, the T-Rex freed up space for jaw muscles to grow. This increased the robustness of the T-Rex skull, increased its jaw muscles, and allowed for a much more powerful bite. The big trade-off was that it gradually developed much smaller eyeballs. This left it borderline visually impaired. The T-Rex would have had utterly atrocious vision, hardly able to see anything except movement. But really, that was all the great carnivore needed. Once he locked onto a victim, His massive mouth and dagger-like teeth took care of the rest. The alligator gar. The alligator gar is by far the largest species of freshwater gar in the world. Despite its name, the alligator gar is not a reptile, but a fish. They look like animals that you'd find swimming alongside dinosaurs millions of years ago. They have long and slender bodies, long snouts for snatching prey, and mesmerizing diamond scales. But the truly impressive part about the alligator gar is that it can grow to be roughly 8 feet long and weigh over 300 pounds. Adults have double rows of teeth for ripping and tearing, and they can live for several decades. In Mississippi in 2011, the largest alligator gar in history was captured. It weighed 327 pounds and was believed to be around 95 years old. That is an extremely old fish, and perhaps the oldest alligator gar to ever live in the Mississippi River. These impressive creatures can be found all the way from Ohio to Mexico, but are most frequently caught in Texas. In 2022, a Texan angler named Peyton Moore caught the biggest fish of his life in a river outside Houston. Peyton said it was like wrestling in the mud with a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but it was an alligator gar, one that measured 8 feet 2 inches long and weighed 300 pounds. While it didn't break any official records, it was still a gargantuan fish, and one with such a powerful set of jaws that if the angler hadn't been careful, it just might have bitten one of his legs off. The pirarucu. The pirarucu is an Amazonian fish not too many people have heard of before. It has juicy, tender white flesh. It can grow to be over 9 feet long, and it's one of the biggest river monsters in the world. It was once hunted to the brink of extinction, but has since made a triumphant return and is now considered a delicacy. People in the fanciest restaurants of Rio de Janeiro pay a fortune to eat just a few slivers of this fish's yummy meat. According to Frederick Monnier from the Brasserie Rosario restaurant, it was the indigenous communities in the Amazon who stepped in to ensure the survival of what is one of the biggest fish the jungle has ever seen. The pirarucu went from a population of 2,500 in 1999 to over 190,000 in 2018. So, how big can this prized fish get? The biggest pirarucu can weigh 485 pounds. That's really huge, especially seeing as the fish lives primarily in rivers, and it is a ferocious carnivore. It belongs to a unique group of primitive bony-tongued fishes called Osteoglossidae, and you'll never believe how it hunts. It doesn't use teeth to bite its victims, but rather crushes them with its tooth-studded tongue. The tongue of the pirarucu is such an effective weapon that the Amazonian tribes use it as a seed grater, kind of like a natural cheese grater. Another thing that makes the pirarucu such a unique river monster is that it can breathe fresh air. It has a specialized air bladder that allows it to breathe just like we do, and it purposely finds waters low in oxygen so that it can feed on oxygen-deprived fish. The white river monster. There is said to be a very curious creature lurking in the White River outside of Newport in Arkansas. It's such a popular legend that the Arkansas state legislature went so far as to create a refuge for the mysterious beast adjacent to the Jacksonport State Park. The legislature also made it illegal to kill or otherwise harm the White River monster. The locals simply call him Whitey, and he's been sighted for over 150 years in the area. It was the Quapaw Indians who first told each other stories of the mysterious serpent in the lake, passing the tales down from generation to generation. We don't know how old the story is, since it was carried through the ages by word of mouth. The Native Americans used to tell stories of being attacked by the White River monster and having their canoes flipped over. Then, during the Civil War, there were rumors that the White River monster had joined up with the Union and started attacking Confederate ships. At least one sinking of a Confederate gunship has been attributed to the monster. As the years went on, more and more people reportedly witnessed the monster in the lake. A farmer by the name of Bramlelt Bateman reported seeing it multiple times in 1937. 3 fishermen on the river witnessed it in 1966 and described the creature as having a tail like a mermaid. They also said it had a monkey's head and arms like flippers. In 1971, two men reportedly saw tracks in the muddy riverbanks of some kind of three-toed creature they'd never seen before. Some have described the monster as a giant snake. Some say it has a spiny backbone like a Spinosaurus, and it's estimated to be about 30 feet long. The marbled eel. The giant mottled eel is also called the marbled eel, and it's considered to be a terrifying river monster. It's the largest species of anguillid eel with a total length of up to 6.6 feet, and while it only grows to be 45 pounds, that's still pretty big for an eel. Just imagine a slippery, serpent-like creature with fangs that's longer than you and weighs as much as a small child. To make the creature even more mysterious and terrifying, it supposedly eats people. Multiple disappearances have been reported on the Pacific island of Fiji, where people were vanishing on the island's remote interior. One of these supposed victims disappeared near a freshwater river behind a dam, then was later discovered dead with circular wounds all over their body. Some said it could have been an octopus, although that would have been strange since octopuses typically don't travel into fresh water. Instead, locals believed it was a gigantic eel living around the dam that attacked and killed the person. It's also not that hard to believe, seeing as eels are known for their unique death roll attack. This is when they bite hold of something and spin rapidly, disorienting their prey and drowning them. And on that note, it's shout-out time! Wanted to say a big thank you to Sarah Booth and the Sausage Continuum. Thanks so much for watching! If you are new here, welcome, and be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The Japanese giant salamander. The Japanese giant salamander is the second biggest salamander in the world, but it's not like any kind of salamander you've ever seen at home. This thing is just shy of being a real-life dragon. It's a huge amphibian which lives in the streams and rivers of Japan, preferably in fast-flowing systems, and is currently under the threat of extinction. The Japanese giant salamander can grow over 5 feet long and weigh over 55 pounds. It really does look like a prehistoric creature left behind from the days of the dinosaurs. Even its skin, a dark mottled pattern of gray and brown, looks like the skin of a dinosaur. But at the end of the day, the giant salamander looks almost identical to the North American salamanders. The real difference is that it's huge. Oh, and also dangerous. When the giant salamander feels threatened, it will secrete a sticky white substance, kind of like mucus, that scientists say could be toxic to predators. This secretion stinks like Japanese peppers and is so bad it can make you nauseous. Like other salamanders, the giant Japanese variety are miracles of nature. They can regrow both skin and bone, boasting some of the best and most coveted regenerative capabilities of any animal that's ever lived. The large-toothed sawfish. The large-toothed sawfish is a nightmare like you won't believe. It was once prosperous all around the globe, but is now primarily found near the Gulf of Mexico and down the Atlantic coast to South America. It can also be found in the Caribbean. Large-toothed sawfish are unique in that they are usually born in freshwater rivers, then migrate into relatively salty waters where it's tropical and warm. For this reason, large-toothed sawfish can be found hanging out in estuaries, rivers, and even salty coastlines. But what exactly makes the large-toothed sawfish so terrifying? The answer is something called a rostrum. This is the part of the fish that gives it its name. It has a snout protruding from its face that looks like a bleached chainsaw. Attached to it are 14 to 24 large rostral teeth. The rostrum itself makes up for over a quarter of the fish's length, which is approximately 20 feet long, so the snout is about 5 feet long. The rostrum, although it may look like a weapon, which it is more of a sensing rod. It's used to give the fish a sixth sense, allowing it to detect electric fields. It's like if your nose could detect the subtle presence of electricity given off by nearby life forms. There are thousands of tiny organs on the rostrum that pick up the presence of any nearby living organism. And then, of course, there's its use as a weapon. It is a major killing tool. The fish can move it back and forth just like a real chainsaw to stun its victim, then dismember it. And if the fish happens to get into a situation with a crocodile or a shark, It will use its nose chainsaw to cut and dismember where necessary. The miniwasiu. The miniwasiu is a legend from the Missouri River. The beast originated in tales told by the Dakota Nation. They spoke of a mysterious creature that lived at the bottom of the Missouri River and was very rarely seen by humans. But whenever somebody did see it, the thing was so dreadful it would give them nightmares for the rest of their lives. It would also cause the witness to go completely insane and be thrown into such a fit of madness that the only cure was often death. What's really fascinating about the miniwasiu is that if the legends are to be believed, it doesn't look like any other sea creature. The Native Americans described it as being covered with hair like a buffalo, as red as freshly spilled blood, and having one eye in the center of its forehead like a cyclops. It also had a single horn like a rhinoceros and a backbone like a big bladed saw. It's so horribly ugly that you can die just by looking at it. And supposedly, the miniwasiu becomes active in the Missouri River every spring. The Monongahela River Monsters. The Monongahela River begins near the city of Pittsburgh and stretches for 200 miles to the south, way down to the remotest depths of the Appalachian Mountains. Its branches and tributaries delve into forests so old that some have rarely ever been seen by human eyes. Because of its remoteness and isolation in one of the most mysterious regions of America, it is no surprise that there are plenty of supposed monsters living in its waters. According to historian Glenn Lowe, the indigenous people of Appalachia were the first to come up with stories of monsters in the river. And then, when the first immigrants arrived in cities like Fairmont and Morgantown, they began telling stories of their own. One of these monsters is called the ogua. It first appears in written testimonies in the 1700s. A young man stationed at Fort Harmar in Ohio wrote a letter to his parents in Connecticut about a strange creature which he said stayed in the water during the daytime, but at night crawls out in search of food, which is usually deer. The creature was said to have a tail 15 feet long, 2 heads, a shell like a turtle, and a hunger for blood. Nobody really knows if the ogua ever existed, or really what kind of monsters are hiding deep in the waterways of Appalachia. The St. John's River Monster. In Florida's St. John River, there is supposedly a terrifying monster. Its nickname is Johnny, and its story goes back to 1849. The captain of a schooner was shocked when he and his crew witnessed an immense sea serpent lift its head out of the water and show the top of its gigantic slimy body. It had fins several feet long, and the captain estimated it to be roughly 90 feet long. When the captain asked the local citizens of Jacksonville what they thought about his story, they weren't even surprised. Many people claimed to have already seen the beast, and it was just kind of an accepted fact that there was a prehistoric dinosaur living in the St. John's River. Although, keep in mind, this was around the same time that the English had just set up their own bureau to investigate the Loch Ness Monster. The 19th century was a time of speculation and mass hysteria over all kinds of cryptid beasts. About a century later, the Orlando Sentinel reported in October of 1953 that the St. John's River Monster had been seen again. A man named Owen Godwin had promised to pay $5,000 to anyone who could catch it alive. Rumor at the time was that the monster had a horn like a narwhal and was 30 feet long. It had been witnessed by nearly a dozen people. But alas, nobody ever captured the monster, and nobody was ever awarded the $5,000. Some believe it was just an anaconda living in the river, but the mystery has never been solved. The Freshwater Stingray. The Freshwater Stingray is yet another horrifying monster that lives in the Amazon River. It's one of the only rays in the world that lives in freshwater instead of saltwater, and it's honestly a pretty docile creature. It's considered peaceful and not aggressive in the slightest, and it generally tries to stay away from humans. Yet despite its calm nature, scientists say the freshwater stingray is responsible for more injuries to humans annually than any other freshwater species in the Amazon. So, how is this possible? It's because each stingray has a tail that can reach about 1 foot in length. Because their tails are constantly shedding and being replaced, Sometimes they have two at the same time. They spend almost all their lives stuck in the muck at the bottom of riverbeds. And so when people are wading through rivers or even just going for a swim to cool down, they frequently step on the stingrays by accident. And when that happens, their tails flick out and they stab into skin with their tipped barbs. The tail of the freshwater stingray is no joke. When the barb is withdrawn, it rips the flesh apart. Plus, there are small grooves underneath the barb which release protein venom. It's not generally enough to kill, but it can cause excruciating pain and misery. Thanks for watching! Which of these freaky river monsters would you least want to meet out in the wild? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!